The concrete was cold against my back, even through the layers of cardboard I'd managed to scrounge from behind the Dollar General earlier that evening. The Interstate 85 bridge stretched overhead like a concrete sky, its massive pillars creating a maze of shadows where guys like me could disappear from the world above. Cars rumbled past in an endless stream, their headlights occasionally sweeping across our makeshift camp, illuminating the collection of shopping carts, tarps, and human forms huddled against the Georgia winter. My name is Marcus Thompson, though most folks around here just call me Tank on account of my size. 6'4" and built like a linebacker, which I was once upon a time, back when I had a future that stretched beyond finding my next meal. That was before the injury, before the pills, before everything fell apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. Now at 42, I'm just another invisible man in America's growing army of forgotten souls. The smell of wood smoke drifted through the air from someone's barrel fire deeper under the bridge, mixed with the perpetual odor of exhaust fumes and something I didn't want to identify. It created the particular perfume of homelessness that clings to your clothes and settles into your pores until you can't smell anything else. My stomach growled, reminding me that the half-eaten sandwich I'd found in a dumpster behind Subway was already a distant memory. "Tank, you awake over there?" The voice belonged to Whiskey Pete, a Vietnam vet who'd been living under this bridge longer than anyone could remember. His weathered face emerged from the shadows, illuminated by the ember of his cigarette. "Yeah, Pete. Can't seem to drift off tonight." I shifted on my cardboard bed, trying to find a position where the cold didn't seep straight through to my bones. Something's got me restless. Probably that storm rolling in. My joints are acting up something fierce. Pete took another drag, the red glow highlighting the deep lines etched by years of hard living. "Weather service says we're in for a real soaker. Might want to move your stuff back further under the overpass." Thunder rumbled in the distance, confirming Pete's prediction. I gathered my few possessions, a torn sleeping bag that had seen better decades, a backpack containing everything I owned, and a small radio that still picked up the local stations when the wind was right. The approaching storm matched my mood perfectly. 3 years living like this, and sometimes I wondered if I'd ever see the inside of a real home again. The rain started as a whisper, tiny droplets that danced on the concrete and made everything smell like wet earth and motor oil. Within minutes, it transformed into a steady downpour that sent everyone scrambling for deeper shelter. I pressed myself against the massive concrete support pillar, pulling my sleeping bag over my head like a hood, and watched the water cascade from the bridge above in silvery sheets. That's when I heard it, a sound that cut through the rain and traffic noise like a knife through butter, a baby crying. Not the regular fussing of an infant, but the desperate, terrified wailing of a child in genuine distress. The sound seemed to be coming from the residential area beyond the industrial strip that bordered our homeless encampment. "Pete, you hear that?" "Hear what?" He cupped his ear, straining to listen over the storm. "Baby crying. Sounds like it's in trouble." Pete shook his head. "Tank, you been out here too long, man. Your mind's playing tricks on you. Ain't no babies around here at 2 in the morning." But I knew what I heard. 20 years of coaching high school football had sharpened my ability to pick out individual voices in a crowd, and this wasn't my imagination. Something was wrong. I stood up, water immediately soaking through my thin jacket, and peered out from under the bridge toward the cluster of rundown apartments and small houses that made up the Cedar Grove neighborhood. An orange glow flickered through the rain, faint at first, then growing brighter. Fire. My blood ran cold as I realized what I was seeing. One of the old wooden houses was burning, and in this downpour, it would take the fire department precious extra minutes to respond. Every second counted when flames were involved. "Pete, there's a fire over on Maple Street. I gotta go check it out." "Tank, don't be stupid. That ain't our problem. Let the fire department handle it." But I was already moving, my feet carrying me out from under the bridge and into the storm. The rain hit me like icy needles, but I barely noticed. That baby's cry was getting fainter, almost drowned out by the sound of crackling flames and the storm. I ran across the empty lot that separated the bridge from the neighborhood, my worn boots splashing through puddles and struggling for traction on the wet grass. The house at 247 Maple Street was fully engulfed on one side, orange flames licking hungrily at the night sky despite the rain. It was one of those old shotgun houses, common in this part of Atlanta, narrow and long, with wooden siding that was feeding the fire like kindling. Neighbors were starting to emerge from their homes, standing on their porches in robes and pajamas, cell phones pressed to their ears as they called 911. The baby's cries were definitely coming from inside. "Is anyone in there?" I shouted to a middle-aged woman standing on the porch next door, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. "The Johnsons live there," she called back, her voice strained with panic. "Maria and her baby girl, little Rosa. Maria works the night shift at the hospital, but the baby should be with Mrs. Chen, the babysitter." My heart sank. Mrs. Chen was probably elderly, maybe unable to get herself and the baby out quickly enough. The front of the house was already consumed by flames, but the back might still be accessible. I didn't stop to think about the risks, about the fact that I had no training for this kind of situation, about the very real possibility that I might not make it out alive. I circled around to the back of the house where the fire hadn't yet reached. The wooden steps to the back door were still intact, though heat was radiating from the structure like an oven. I could hear the baby crying more clearly now, and underneath it the voice of an elderly woman calling out in what sounded like Mandarin. The back door was locked. I kicked it once, twice, and on the third try, the old wood frame splintered and gave way. Smoke poured out of the opening like a black river, and the heat hit me like a physical blow. I pulled my wet shirt up over my nose and mouth and stepped into hell. The interior of the house was a maze of smoke and shadow. The fire was eating its way through the front rooms, but I could see a hallway that might lead to the bedrooms. The baby's cries were coming from that direction, mixed now with the frightened voice of Mrs. Chen calling for help. I dropped to my hands and knees, knowing that the air would be cleaner closer to the floor, and crawled toward the sound. "Hello? Mrs. Chen? I'm here to help," I called out, my voice muffled by the shirt over my face. "Help us, please help us!" The voice was coming from a room at the end of the hall. I crawled faster, the heat growing more intense with each foot of progress. The smoke was so thick I could barely see my own hands in front of me. I found them in what must have been the baby's room. Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman who couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds, was huddled in the corner holding a screaming infant. She was coughing violently, and I could see that she was barely conscious. The room was full of smoke, but the flames hadn't reached this part of the house yet. "Ma'am, we need to get out of here right now," I said, gently taking the baby from her arms. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 months old, her face red from crying and the smoke. "Can you walk?" Mrs. Chen nodded weakly and tried to stand, but her legs gave out immediately. I made a quick decision. I tucked the baby inside my jacket, zipping it up to protect her from the smoke, then scooped Mrs. Chen up in my arms. She weighed next to nothing, but carrying both of them while crawling was going to be impossible. I had to risk standing up and walking upright through the smoke. The heat was unbearable, like being inside an oven, and I could feel the synthetic materials of my jacket starting to melt against my skin, but I forced myself to move forward, one step at a time, following the wall with my shoulder as a guide. The hallway seemed to stretch forever. Behind us, I could hear the fire roaring as it consumed more of the house. A beam crashed somewhere nearby, sending up a shower of sparks and making the whole structure shudder. We were running out of time. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, I felt cooler air on my face. The back door was just ahead, and beyond it the rain and safety. I stumbled out of the burning house and collapsed on the wet grass, gasping for air and still clutching Mrs. Chen and the baby. "Oh my God, you got them out!" The neighbor woman was running toward us, her robe billowing behind her. "Are they okay? Is the baby hurt?" I unzipped my jacket and checked on little Rosa. She was still crying, which I took as a good sign, and though she was covered in soot, she didn't seem to be injured. Mrs. Chen was unconscious but breathing. The sound of sirens was growing louder in the distance. The fire department arrived just as the roof of the house began to collapse, sending a tower of sparks into the rainy sky. The paramedics took over care of Mrs. Chen and the baby, checking their vitals and administering oxygen. I sat on the curb, watching the controlled chaos of the emergency response, and realized that my hands were shaking. "Sir, we need to check you out too." A young paramedic with kind eyes was kneeling beside me. "You've inhaled a lot of smoke, and it looks like you have some burns on your arms." I looked down and saw that she was right. The heat had singed the hair on my forearms and left angry red marks on my skin. But I was alive, and more importantly, so were Mrs. Chen and baby Rosa. Fire Chief Davis, a stocky man with 30 years of experience written in the lines of his face, came over to where I was sitting. "Son, that was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've seen in all my years on the job. Probably both. You saved 2 lives tonight." "Just did what anyone would do," I mumbled, suddenly aware of how I must look to these people. My clothes were torn and filthy. I hadn't shaved in weeks, and I probably smelled like a mixture of smoke and street living. No, not just anyone, Chief Davis said firmly. Most people would have called 911 and waited for us to arrive. You went in there when every instinct should have told you to stay away. What's your name? Marcus Thompson. But people call me Tank. Well, Tank, the Johnson family owes you a debt they can never repay. That little girl you saved is going to grow up because of what you did tonight. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors emerged from their houses despite the late hour and the rain, drawn by the spectacle of the fire and the rescue. I heard whispers as people realized I was homeless, saw the judgment in some of their eyes, but also something else: respect, gratitude, curiosity about the big man who had risked everything for strangers. Maria Johnson arrived just as the ambulance was preparing to take Mrs. Chen and Rosa to the hospital. She was a young woman, maybe 25, with the scrubs and tired eyes of someone who worked long shifts to make ends meet. When she saw her baby in the paramedic's arms, she broke down completely. "My baby, is she okay? Please tell me she's okay," Maria sobbed, reaching for Rosa with trembling hands. "She's going to be fine, Mom," the paramedic assured her. "Thanks to this gentleman here, we got to her in time. She'll need to be observed overnight for smoke inhalation, but her vitals are strong." Maria turned to look at me for the first time, taking in my appearance with obvious confusion. You saved my daughter." I nodded, suddenly feeling awkward and out of place among all these normal people with their normal lives. "I just heard her crying and couldn't ignore it." "I don't understand," Maria said, wiping tears from her eyes. "You don't even know us. Why would you risk your life for strangers?" It was a question I'd been asking myself since the adrenaline started wearing off. Why had I run toward the fire when everything in my rational mind told me to stay away? "Because she needed help," I said simply, "and I was the only one close enough to do anything about it." Maria stepped forward and, to my complete surprise, wrapped her arms around me in a fierce hug. I stood there awkwardly, unsure how to respond to such genuine affection from a stranger. When was the last time someone had hugged me? I couldn't remember. "Thank you," she whispered against my chest. "Thank you for saving my little girl." The next few hours passed in a blur. I gave my statement to the police, was treated by the paramedics for minor burns and smoke inhalation, and found myself at the center of more attention than I'd received in years. Local news crews arrived as dawn was breaking, drawn by the story of the homeless hero who had rescued a baby from a burning building. This is Jennifer Martinez reporting from the Cedar Grove neighborhood, where an extraordinary act of bravery unfolded in the early hours of this morning. The reporter's voice carried clearly across the crowd that had gathered to watch the smoldering remains of the Johnson house. A homeless man named Marcus Thompson, who goes by Tank, risked his own life to save a 6-month-old baby and her elderly babysitter from this house fire. I tried to avoid the cameras, but they seemed to find me wherever I went. Other homeless people from under the bridge had come to see what all the commotion was about, including Whiskey Pete, who looked at me with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. "Never seen anything like it, Tank," Pete said, shaking his head. "You done stirred up a real hornet's nest of attention. Hope you're ready for what comes next." I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I was about to find out. By afternoon, the story had spread beyond the local news. Social media picked it up, and suddenly, Homeless Hero was trending on Twitter. My picture, taken by someone with a phone camera during the rescue, was being shared thousands of times, accompanied by comments ranging from inspired to skeptical to downright mean. "See, this proves that you can't judge a book by its cover," wrote one person. "Finally a homeless person doing something positive instead of just begging for money," wrote another. "This guy is a hero, but what about all the other homeless people who need help too?" asked a third. I didn't have social media accounts, didn't even have a phone, so I only heard about the online reactions secondhand from people who approached me throughout the day. Some wanted to shake my hand, others wanted to take selfies, and a few wanted to lecture me about getting my life together now that I had this opportunity. The opportunity they were talking about became clear when Maria Johnson returned from the hospital that evening. She found me back under the bridge, trying to process everything that had happened and get some rest. But rest was impossible with reporters still lurking around and people coming by every few minutes to gawk at the homeless hero. "Tank, can I talk to you for a minute?" Maria's voice was soft, tentative, as she approached the makeshift camp under the bridge. Several of the other homeless residents watched suspiciously as this clean, well-dressed woman entered their world. "Of course. How's Rosa and Mrs. Chen?" "They're both going to be fine, thanks to you. Rosa doesn't even seem traumatized by the whole experience. The doctors said that if you had waited even a few more minutes, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. We walked away from the others, finding a relatively quiet spot where we could talk without an audience. Up close, I could see that Maria was younger than I'd first thought, probably in her early 20s, with the kind of determined resilience that came from being a single mother in tough circumstances. "I've been thinking all day about how to thank you properly," she said. "What you did goes so far beyond anything I could ever repay, but I want to try. I've been talking to some people, and we have an idea." "You don't need to do anything," I said quickly. "I'm just glad everyone's okay. But I do need to do something, and it's not just me. The whole neighborhood has been talking about what you did. Mrs. Patterson from down the street started a GoFundMe page for you this morning. It's already raised over $15,000. I stared at her in shock. $15,000 was more money than I'd seen at one time since before everything fell apart. "That's very kind, but I don't know if I can accept that. I didn't do it for money. We know that. That's exactly why everyone wants to help. But there's more." Maria pulled out her phone and showed me a long list of messages and emails. "A local construction company wants to offer you a job. The Marriott downtown wants to put you up in a room for as long as you need it. 3 different churches have offered to help you get back on your feet. And there's a woman named Sarah Mitchell who runs a non-profit for veterans. She wants to talk to you about housing assistance." The list seemed endless. Food donations, clothing offers, job opportunities, invitations to speak at events, requests for interviews. It was overwhelming, like being hit by a tidal wave of generosity and attention. "I don't understand," I said. "Why now? I've been homeless for 3 years. Where was all this help before?" Maria was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "I think sometimes people need to see proof that someone is worth saving before they're willing to help. What you did proved that you're not just a homeless man. You're a person with courage and heart who deserves a second chance." It was an honest answer, even if it stung a little. I thought about all the times I'd walked past people like me, in the years before my own fall from grace, how easy it had been to look away, to assume that anyone living on the streets must somehow deserve it. What if I disappoint them? The question came out before I could stop it, revealing fears I'd been carrying for years. What if I take their help and screw it up again? What if I'm not the hero they think I am? "Then you'll be human," Maria said simply. "Nobody expects you to be perfect, Tank. They just want to give you the same chance they'd want if they found themselves in your situation." Over the next few days, the attention intensified. The story was picked up by national news outlets, and suddenly I was being interviewed by reporters from CNN, Fox News, and ABC. Each interview felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold on television. "So Marcus, or Tank as you prefer, tell us what was going through your mind as you ran toward that burning building," asked Anderson Cooper during a segment on CNN. "Honestly, Anderson, I wasn't thinking much of anything. I heard a baby crying and saw flames and my body just moved. You don't really have time to weigh the pros and cons when someone's life is in immediate danger. You've been homeless for 3 years. How does it feel to suddenly have the whole country talking about your heroism?" It was the question everyone wanted to ask, and I'd been struggling with how to answer it honestly. It feels strange, if I'm being honest. For 3 years, I've been invisible to most people. Now everyone wants to know my story. I appreciate the attention, but I also hope people remember that there are thousands of other folks living on the streets who have stories worth hearing too. The interview responses I gave seemed to only increase public interest. The GoFundMe page Maria had mentioned grew to over $50,000. Job offers poured in from across the country. I received letters from as far away as California and Maine, from people who wanted to share their own stories of overcoming homelessness or simply to express their admiration. But it was the local response that moved me most. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who had started the fundraiser, organized a block party to celebrate Rosa's rescue and to officially welcome me into the Cedar Grove community. It was held in the park, just a few blocks from where the fire had occurred, and it seemed like half the city showed up. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet a true hero," announced Councilman Williams as he introduced me to the crowd gathered under the pavilion. "Tank Thompson shows us that heroism isn't about having superpowers or wearing a cape. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when circumstances call for it." The applause was thunderous, and I found myself fighting back tears as I looked out at the sea of faces, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, young and old, all united in this moment of celebration. Children held up handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Tank," and "Our Hero." Local businesses had donated food and drinks, turning what started as a simple thank you gathering into a genuine community festival. But the most meaningful moment came when Maria took the microphone to speak. "3 weeks ago, I thought my world was ending," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the park. "I got the call that my house was on fire and my baby was trapped inside. In those moments, driving through the rain toward the flames, I thought I was going to lose everything that mattered to me." She paused, wiping away tears, and looked directly at me, standing at the side of the stage. "Tank saved more than Rosa's life that night. He saved my future, my reason for living, my hope, and in doing so, he reminded all of us about the kind of people we want to be. He showed us that every life has value, that heroism comes from the heart, not from circumstances." The crowd erupted again, and this time I didn't fight the tears. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of a community that valued me, not despite my past struggles, but because of how I'd chosen to respond when it mattered most. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the non-profit director Maria had mentioned, approached me after the ceremony. She was a petite woman with silver hair and the kind of steady presence that immediately inspired confidence. "Tank, I've been working with homeless veterans for 15 years, she said as we walked away from the crowd. "I've seen a lot of success stories, but I've also seen a lot of relapses. The transition from street life back to mainstream society is incredibly challenging, even with all the support you're receiving." "Are you trying to scare me?" I asked with a slight smile. "Just the opposite. I want to help you succeed. The key is taking it one step at a time and not trying to change everything at once. You've got momentum right now, but momentum can be dangerous if it moves too fast." She offered to serve as my advocate and counselor as I navigated the various opportunities being presented to me. Her first recommendation was to take the hotel room offer, get cleaned up and rested, and then make careful decisions about employment and permanent housing. "The construction job sounds promising," she said, reviewing the list of offers I'd received. "Manual labor plays to your strengths, and it's honest work that builds real skills. The pay is decent, and the company has a good reputation for treating employees fairly. What about all this money people have donated? Put most of it aside for emergencies and long-term stability. Use some for immediate needs, clothes, tools, maybe a reliable used car eventually. But don't let it make you feel like you don't need to work. Purpose comes from contributing, not just from having resources." Her advice proved invaluable over the following weeks. I took the hotel room, spent 3 days sleeping in a real bed and taking hot showers, and slowly began to remember what it felt like to live indoors. I bought new clothes, work boots, jeans, flannel shirts, and got a haircut and a shave at a barber shop where the owner refused to let me pay. "Heroes don't pay for haircuts in my shop," he said with a grin that revealed several gold teeth. The construction job started on a Monday morning in February. I showed up at the worksite at 6:30 a.m., nervous as hell, and trying not to think about how long it had been since I'd held steady employment. The foreman, a weathered man named Big Jim, who stood about 6 inches shorter than me, but probably weighed just as much, looked me up and down with shrewd eyes. "So you're the famous Tank," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Hope you work as hard as you rescue babies." "I'll do my best, sir." "We'll see about that. Construction isn't about being a hero for 5 minutes. It's about showing up every day, rain or shine, and putting in 8 hours of honest work. You think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir, I do." "Good. Jimmy will show you the ropes. We're working on a mixed-use development downtown. Apartments on top, retail on the bottom. It's hard work, but it's good work." The physical demands of construction felt good after years of idle time. My body remembered how to be strong, how to lift and carry and endure. My hands, soft from years of inactivity, quickly developed new calluses. My back ached at the end of each day, but it was the good ache of muscles being used for their intended purpose. More importantly, I found myself part of another community. The construction crew was a mix of characters, young guys just starting out, experienced professionals at the peak of their careers, older workers grinding toward retirement. There was Carlos, a Mexican immigrant who sent most of his paycheck back to his family in Guadalajara. Tommy, a former Marine who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan. Big Mike, who'd worked construction for 30 years and could estimate materials costs in his head faster than most people could use a calculator. "You know, Tank," Tommy said during our lunch break one day as we sat on steel beams 50 feet above the street, Most of the guys were skeptical when Jim hired you, figured you for a publicity stunt, someone who'd wash out as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. And now? Now we know better. You pull your weight, you don't complain, and you show up on time every day. That's all that matters to us. It was the kind of acceptance I'd been hoping for, based on performance, not pity or celebrity status. These men didn't care that I'd been on CNN or that thousands of strangers had donated money to help me get back on my feet. They cared that I could swing a hammer, carry my share of the load, and be counted on when deadlines were tight. The routine of work was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Waking up at 5:30 a.m., grabbing coffee and a breakfast sandwich from the diner next to the hotel, arriving at the job site ready for whatever needed to be done. There was satisfaction in seeing a structure take shape day by day, knowing that my hands had helped build something that would stand for decades. After 2 months of steady work and hotel living, Dr. Mitchell helped me find a small apartment in a converted warehouse, about 10 minutes from the construction site. It wasn't much, a studio with exposed brick walls, concrete floors, and windows that looked out onto an alley, but it was mine. The first night I spent there, I sat on the floor in the middle of the empty room and cried, not tears of sadness, but of relief, of gratitude, of overwhelming emotion at having my own space again. 4 walls, a roof, a door I could lock, a bathroom I didn't have to share with strangers. Simple things that most people took for granted, but which felt like miracles to someone who'd spent 3 years sleeping under bridges and in doorways. I furnished the apartment slowly, deliberately, mostly with second-hand items from thrift stores and estate sales. A bed, a small table, 2 chairs, a television that got basic cable. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was trying to build a life that felt sustainable and real. Maria and Rosa became regular visitors. At least once a week, Maria would stop by after her shift at the hospital, sometimes bringing dinner, always bringing Rosa, who was growing into a cheerful, chubby-cheeked baby with an infectious laugh. These visits became the highlight of my week, a reminder of why I'd taken that first scary step toward the flames. "She's starting to say mama and dada," Maria told me during one visit, bouncing Rosa on her knee while I heated up the Chinese takeout she'd brought. "The pediatrician says she's developing perfectly. No signs of any lingering effects from the smoke inhalation. That's wonderful news." "Tank, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you ever think about having your own family? Kids of your own?" It was a question that hit deeper than I'd expected. I used to. Before everything fell apart, I was engaged to a woman named Lisa. We talked about kids, about buying a house, about growing old together. But when I got hurt and started taking pills, when I lost my job and couldn't get clean, I trailed off, remembering those dark months when my life had spiraled out of control. What happened to Lisa? She tried to help at first, got me into rehab, supported me through 2 attempts to get clean, but I kept relapsing, kept disappointing her, kept choosing the pills over our relationship. Finally, she gave me an ultimatum: get clean and stay clean, or she was gone. And I chose wrong. Thought I could handle everything myself, that I didn't need her help or anyone else's. By the time I realized how stupid I was being, she'd moved on, married a guy from her work, had 2 kids. I heard they're really happy. Maria was quiet for a moment, processing this glimpse into my past. "Do you regret it?" "Every day. But I also understand why she did what she did." You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and at the time I was more committed to my addiction than to our relationship. And now? Now I'm trying to save myself. One day at a time, one good decision at a time. Maybe someday I'll be ready for that kind of commitment again, but first I need to prove to myself that I can stay on track when things get difficult. Spring turned to summer, and my life settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly normal. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I started attending AA meetings at Dr. Mitchell's suggestion, not because I'd been drinking heavily, but because the principles and community support translated well to staying clean from pills. The meetings were held in the basement of St. Mark's Methodist Church, a diverse group of people united by their shared struggle with addiction. "Hi, I'm Tank, and I'm an addict," became my regular introduction to the group. "Hi, Tank," they'd respond in unison, and something about that simple ritual helped reinforce my commitment to staying clean. I also began volunteering at a local homeless shelter, serving meals and sometimes just talking to guys who reminded me of myself 3 years earlier. There was Jerome, a former accountant whose gambling addiction had cost him everything; David, a veteran with PTSD who couldn't hold down a job; Miguel, a teenager who'd aged out of foster care and had nowhere to go. "Oh, you really think things can get better?" Jerome asked me one evening as we cleaned up after dinner service. "I think they can if you're willing to do the work," I said, wiping down tables while he stacked chairs. "But you have to want it more than you want, whatever sent you here in the first place. That's the hard part, isn't it? Wanting something you've never had more than something that's destroying you but feels familiar." It was an astute observation from someone who understood addiction from the inside. "Yeah, that's exactly the hard part. But it gets easier the longer you're clean. The pills used to be the first thing I thought about when I woke up, and the last thing I thought about before I went to sleep. Now sometimes I go whole days without thinking about them at all." Working with the homeless community kept me grounded and reminded me how fragile my current stability really was. One injury, one economic downturn, one bad decision, and I could easily find myself back under the bridge. That awareness didn't make me paranoid, but it did make me grateful for every paycheck, every night in my own bed, every day that I woke up clean and sober. The one-year anniversary of the fire arrived with surprising media attention. Local news stations wanted to do follow-up stories, and several national outlets reached out for interviews about my transformation. I agreed to a few, hoping that my story might inspire other people who were struggling, but I tried to keep the focus on the ongoing issues of homelessness and addiction rather than on my individual success. "A year ago, you risked your life to save a baby from a burning building," said the reporter from Good Morning America during a live satellite interview from my apartment. "Looking back, do you see that moment as a turning point in your life?" "I think the turning point was actually what happened after the rescue," I said, trying to look directly into the camera, despite the bright lights and the strangeness of the situation. The rescue itself was just instinct. Anyone would have done the same thing, but the way the community responded, the support they offered, the chance they gave me to rebuild my life, that's what really changed everything. What would you say to someone who's struggling with homelessness or addiction right now? I'd say that your current situation doesn't define your future potential. I'd also say that accepting help isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom. And I'd remind them that recovery isn't a straight line. You're going to have bad days, but that doesn't mean you're failing. After the interview aired, I received hundreds of emails and letters from people across the country. Some were from other recovering addicts sharing their own stories. Others were from people who'd never experienced homelessness, but wanted to express their support. A few were from cynics who questioned whether my transformation was genuine or just an act for the cameras. One letter stood out from all the rest. It was from Lisa, my ex-fiancée, who'd seen the anniversary coverage on the news. "Dear Marcus," it began, "I hope you don't mind me reaching out after all this time. I saw your interview on Good Morning America, and I wanted you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. I know our relationship ended badly, and I carry guilt about not being able to help you through your darkest period. But seeing you now, seeing how you've turned your life around and are helping others, it fills my heart with joy. You always had such a good heart, even when the addiction was controlling everything else. I'm so glad you found your way back to yourself. I hope you're truly happy. Love always, Lisa." Reading her words brought back a flood of memories, both painful and sweet. I spent a long time crafting my response, wanting to strike the right tone, grateful but not desperate, honest but not self-pitying. "Dear Lisa," I wrote, "thank you for reaching out. It means more to me than you could know. I want you to understand that you have nothing to feel guilty about. You tried to save me when I wouldn't save myself, and you made the healthy choice to protect your own well-being when I couldn't get clean. I'm genuinely happy to hear that you found love and built the family we used to dream about together. You deserve all the happiness in the world. The man I am today learned how to be better partly because of the pain of losing you. In a strange way, your leaving forced me to confront who I really was and who I wanted to become. I hope life is treating you and your family with all the kindness you've always deserved." I sealed the letter but didn't send it immediately. Instead, I carried it in my jacket pocket for a week, taking it out occasionally to reread and make sure the words conveyed what I really felt. Finally, on a Saturday morning when Rosa and Maria were visiting, I asked Maria's opinion. "Do you think I should send this?" Maria read the letter carefully while Rosa crawled around the apartment, pulling herself up on furniture and babbling happily to herself. "I think it's beautiful," Maria said finally. "It's honest and kind, and it gives both of you closure. But more importantly, what does your gut tell you? That I need to send it. Not because I'm hoping for anything to come from it, but because she took the risk to reach out to me, and she deserves a thoughtful response. Then send it." I mailed the letter that afternoon, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Some chapters of life need proper endings, even if they don't get happy endings. Work on the downtown construction project was nearing completion, and Big Jim approached me one Friday as we were packing up tools for the weekend. "Tank, I got good news, and I got news that might be good depending on how you look at it," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead with a bandana that had seen better years. "Let's start with the good news. Company's been impressed with your work. You're reliable, you learn fast, and the other guys respect you. We want to offer you a permanent position as a crew supervisor. It comes with a raise, health benefits, and a company truck." "That's incredible, Jim. Thank you." "What's the other news?" "Well, this project's wrapping up next month, and our next big job is in Birmingham, Alabama. Mixed commercial and residential development. Probably 2 years of work. We'd want you to relocate, be the site supervisor for the whole operation. It was a bigger opportunity than I'd ever imagined, but it would mean leaving Atlanta, leaving the community that had embraced me, leaving Maria and Rosa. I asked for the weekend to think about it. That evening I walked through the Cedar Grove neighborhood, past the empty lot where the Johnson house had once stood. Maria had decided not to rebuild there, instead using the insurance money to buy a small house closer to the hospital where she worked. As I stood looking at the vacant space, Mrs. Patterson came out of her house next door. "Evening, Tank. Heard through the grapevine that you might be leaving us. News travels fast around here. Small neighborhood and people care about you. Are you thinking about taking that job in Birmingham?" "I don't know. It's a great opportunity professionally, but this is home now. These are my people." Mrs. Patterson, who was well into her 70s but had the energy of someone decades younger, gestured for me to sit with her on her front porch swing. "Let me tell you something, son. I've lived in this neighborhood for 42 years. I've seen people come and go, seen families grow up and move away, seen businesses open and close. The ones who succeed in life are the ones who know when to plant roots and when to spread their wings. How do you know which is which? You listen to your heart, but you also use your head. This job offer sounds like it could set you up for life, give you skills and experience that no one can ever take away from you. But you're worried about leaving the people who helped you get back on your feet." "Exactly. Well, let me ask you this. What would Maria want you to do?" It was the right question. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from her directly. The next morning I called Maria and asked if she and Rosa wanted to have lunch in the park where the community celebration had been held a year earlier. "I need to talk to you about something," I said as we sat on a picnic table watching Rosa toddle around the playground under the supervision of 2 teenage girls who were clearly smitten with her chubby cheeks and infectious giggles. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay. I got offered a promotion at work, supervising a big project in Birmingham. It would mean relocating for at least 2 years, maybe permanently if things go well." Maria was quiet for a long moment, watching her daughter play. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity. But it would mean leaving you and Rosa, leaving everyone here who helped me get back on my feet. Tank, look at me." Maria's voice was gentle but firm. "You saved my daughter's life. You gave her a future. Now I want to return the favor by giving you some advice. Take the job. I don't want to abandon the people who helped me." "You're not abandoning anyone. You're growing, becoming the person you're meant to be. Do you think we helped you just so you could stay exactly where you are forever? We helped you because we could see your potential. And now you have a chance to live up to that potential. But what about Rosa? I've gotten attached to watching her grow up." Maria smiled, the kind of smile that was simultaneously sad and happy. "Rosa will always remember you, even if she doesn't remember the fire. I'll make sure of that. And Birmingham isn't on the other side of the world. You can visit, and we can come see you sometimes, but Tank, you can't build your future around being our family hero. You need to build it around being your own hero." She was right, of course. The very people who had helped me get back on my feet were now encouraging me to fly further than I'd ever imagined possible. It was scary and exciting and overwhelming all at once. I accepted the job offer on Monday morning. Big Jim grinned and slapped me on the back so hard I nearly stumbled forward. "Outstanding choice, Tank. You're going to do great things down in Alabama. When do you want to relocate? The project starts in 6 weeks, right? I'd like to finish out this job, spend some time saying goodbye to people here, maybe take a week off to get settled in Birmingham before starting the new position." "Sounds like a plan. I'll get HR to work on your relocation package and new contract details." The next month flew by in a whirlwind of preparation and goodbyes. I sold most of my furniture, since the company was providing temporary housing until I could find a permanent place in Birmingham. I said farewell to my AA group, my fellow volunteers at the homeless shelter, my new friends from the neighborhood. Dr. Mitchell helped me find resources in Birmingham for continuing both my volunteer work and my recovery support. The transition might be challenging, she warned. New city, new job responsibilities, new pressures. Make sure you stay connected to your support systems, even if they're different ones than you have here. The hardest goodbye was saved for last. On my final evening in Atlanta, Maria brought Rosa over to my nearly empty apartment for one last visit. Rosa, now walking steadily and starting to say recognizable words, toddled around the echoing space while Maria and I sat on the floor sharing a pizza. "I'm going to miss you both so much," I admitted, feeling the weight of impending separation. "We're going to miss you too, but Tank, I need you to understand something. What you did for us that night changed more than just our lives. It changed the way this whole community thinks about helping people, about second chances, about what heroism really looks like. I hope I can live up to all that. You already have. Just by getting up every morning and choosing to be better than you were the day before, you're living up to it." Rosa crawled over to where I was sitting and pulled herself up using my leg for support. She looked up at me with those bright, curious eyes and said, clear as day, "Tank." It was the first time she'd said my name, and it nearly broke my heart. Maria started crying, and before I knew it, I was crying too. "That's right, sweetheart," Maria whispered to her daughter. "That's Tank. He's the man who saved your life." 2 days later, I loaded my belongings into the company pickup truck that was now officially mine and drove south on Interstate 75 toward my new life in Birmingham. As Atlanta's skyline faded in my rearview mirror, I felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation that reminded me of every major transition I'd ever experienced. The Birmingham project was everything Big Jim had promised and more. We were building a mixed-use development in the downtown revitalization district, and my job as site supervisor meant coordinating with city planners, architects, subcontractors, and a crew of 35 workers. It was challenging work that required skills I'd never used before, but I approached it with the same methodical determination that had gotten me this far. My temporary housing was a furnished apartment in a converted warehouse, not unlike the place I'd lived in Atlanta, but newer and more upscale. The company was paying for it during my first 6 months while I got established and found permanent housing. I spent my evenings exploring the city, getting to know the neighborhoods, finding new places to eat, discovering the rhythms of a city that was simultaneously familiar and foreign. Birmingham had its own version of everything I'd grown to love about Atlanta: great barbecue, friendly people, a thriving music scene, and a complex history that was still being written. The civil rights movement had deep roots here, and I found myself drawn to the museums and historic sites that told the story of ordinary people who had done extraordinary things in the face of overwhelming obstacles. On weekends, I volunteered at a local homeless shelter and attended AA meetings at a church not far from my apartment. The faces were different, but the stories were remarkably similar to what I'd heard in Atlanta: addiction, job loss, family breakdown, mental illness, bad luck, bad choices. The paths to homelessness were as varied as the people who walked them, but the need for compassion and second chances was universal. 3 months into the Birmingham job, I received a call that changed everything. "Tank, it's Maria." Her voice on the phone sounded different, strained with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Maria, how are you? How's Rosa?" We're okay, but I'm calling because I have some news I wanted you to hear from me before you heard it anywhere else." My stomach clenched with sudden fear. "What kind of news?" "Good news, actually. Amazing news. Rosa and I are moving to Birmingham." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? When? Why?" "I got offered a position at UAB Hospital. It's a huge promotion. Nurse practitioner in the pediatric ICU, with a significant pay increase and great benefits. I interviewed 3 weeks ago when they flew me down for the weekend, and they just called today with the offer." "That's incredible, Maria. Congratulations. But are you sure you want to leave Atlanta? All your friends, your support system?" "Tank, Birmingham is only 2 hours from Atlanta. And besides, Rosa and I don't have a lot of family in Georgia anyway. Most of my relatives are scattered across the country. The truth is, when I heard about this job opening, I thought about you being here, and it made the decision easier." I mean Rosa needs positive male role models in her life, and you're the best man I know." I mean, I've been thinking about what it would be like to start fresh somewhere new, and having a friend already established here makes it feel less scary. I mean, maybe this is one of those meant-to-be situations. We talked for another hour, working out details and timelines. Maria would start her new job in 6 weeks, which gave her time to give proper notice in Atlanta, sell her house, and find a place to live in Birmingham. I offered to help with the house hunting since I'd been exploring neighborhoods and had a good sense of the different areas of the city. The next month was a blur of weekend trips back to Atlanta to help Maria pack, real estate showings in Birmingham via video calls, and excited planning for their relocation. I found myself more invested in their move than I'd expected, researching school districts for Rosa's future, identifying the best pediatricians, mapping out parks and playgrounds and family-friendly activities. "You're nesting," observed my new AA sponsor, Harold, a retired steelworker who'd been sober for 18 years. "Getting ready for your chosen family to join you. Is that what this is?" "Looks like it to me. Maria and Rosa aren't blood relatives, but they're family in all the ways that matter. You risked your life for that little girl, and now her mama is following you to a new city. That's not coincidence, son, that's love." Harold's observation stayed with me as I helped Maria and Rosa settle into their new apartment, a bright 2-bedroom place in a family-friendly complex about 15 minutes from both UAB Hospital and my construction site. Rosa, now almost 2 years old, adapted to the move with the resilience of small children, immediately claiming the playground as her territory and charming all the neighbors with her infectious laugh and fearless exploration. Maria's adjustment took longer. Starting a new job in a new city while raising a toddler as a single parent would have been overwhelming for anyone, but she approached it with the same quiet determination I'd seen when she was working night shifts to make ends meet in Atlanta. "Some days, I wonder if I made the right decision," she confided to me one evening as we watched Rosa play in the apartment complex's courtyard. "Everything here is so different, and I miss having Mrs. Patterson next door to help with Rosa when I'm working late shifts. Are you having second thoughts?" "No, not really. The job is incredible. I'm learning so much and making a real difference in these kids' lives. And Rosa loves daycare. She's made friends already. It's just the normal stress of starting over, I guess. Well, for what it's worth, I'm really glad you're here. It feels like I have a real reason to build something permanent in this city now." Maria looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Tank, can I ask you something personal?" "Always. Do you ever think about us as more than friends? I mean, I know we met under unusual circumstances, and I know you probably see yourself as Rosa's protector more than anything else, but..." Her question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibilities and complications and hopes that neither of us had dared to voice before. "Every day," I admitted. "But I didn't want to assume anything or make you feel pressured. You've got so much going on with the new job and adjusting to a new city. The last thing you need is relationship pressure from me. What if I told you that relationship pressure from you is exactly what I need?" We talked until long after Rosa had fallen asleep in my lap, exploring feelings that had been building for months, but which neither of us had felt ready to acknowledge. The conversation was honest and careful, full of questions about timing and expectations, and the complexity of building a romantic relationship on the foundation of such dramatic circumstances. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything because of what happened with the fire," I said. "And I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of us because you saved us," Maria replied. "So where does that leave us?" "Maybe it leaves us free to see what develops naturally, without the weight of obligation or gratitude complicating things." We decided to take it slow, to continue building our friendship while allowing room for romance to grow organically. It was a mature approach that acknowledged both the strength of our connection and the complexity of our situation. Over the following months, slow proved to be perfect. We had dinner together twice a week, sometimes with Rosa, sometimes after she was asleep and Maria had arranged childcare. We went to movies, explored Birmingham's music scene, took long walks through the city's many parks. We talked about everything: our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, our past relationships, our hopes for the future. The physical attraction was undeniable but manageable, building gradually as our emotional intimacy deepened. Our first kiss happened on a cool evening in November, as we sat on Maria's apartment balcony, watching Rosa sleep through the sliding glass door. It was gentle and tentative and perfect, exactly what a first kiss should be between two people who had already been through so much together. "I've been wanting to do that for months," Maria whispered against my lips. I've been wanting you to want to do that for months, I replied, making her laugh. Rosa, meanwhile, had attached herself to me with the fierce loyalty that toddlers reserve for their favorite adults. She called me Tan because Tank was still too difficult for her developing speech, and she insisted on sitting in my lap whenever I visited, bringing me books to read and toys to examine, and endless streams of toddler chatter that I found endlessly entertaining. She thinks of you as her daddy, you know, Maria observed one evening as we watched Rosa demonstrate her latest achievement, building a tower of blocks that was almost as tall as she was. How do you feel about that? I love it. She needs a father figure, and there's no one I trust more with her heart than you. The Birmingham construction project was scheduled to finish in the spring, and Big Jim had been dropping hints about another opportunity that would keep me with the company long term. Corporate's been watching your work down here, Tank, he told me during one of his monthly site visits. Word is they want to offer you a regional supervisor position. 3 states, multiple projects, your own team of site supervisors reporting to you. That sounds like a big step up. Huge step up. Big salary increase, company car, expense account, stock options. But it would mean traveling most of the time, probably only home on weekends. The offer, when it came officially, was everything Jim had described and more. It was the kind of opportunity that could set me up financially for life, the kind of career advancement that most construction workers could only dream about. It was also the kind of position that would make maintaining a relationship and being a father figure to Rosa extremely difficult. I discussed it with Maria over dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, while Rosa was staying overnight with a babysitter from her daycare. It's an incredible opportunity, Maria said, after I'd explained all the details. You'd be crazy not to at least consider it seriously. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. I was hoping we were building towards something more permanent here in Birmingham. Rosa adores you, and I'm falling in love with you. It was the first time either of us had used the L word, and it hit me like a physical blow. I'm falling in love with you too. That's exactly why this decision is so hard. What does your heart tell you to do? My heart tells me to stay here with you and Rosa and see where this relationship goes. But my head tells me that this job offer might never come again, and I'd be foolish to turn down financial security for a relationship that's still so new. There's no wrong choice here, Tank. Either decision makes sense for different reasons. But if I take the traveling job, I'm essentially choosing career over family. Or you're choosing to secure your future so you can eventually provide for a family. We talked in circles for hours, exploring every angle and implication. Finally, Maria made a suggestion that surprised me. What if we table this conversation for now and just spend the next few weeks being completely honest with each other about what we want our futures to look like? Not what we think we should want, but what we actually want. Meaning, you tell me your dreams, your fears, your non-negotiables. I tell you mine. We see if they're compatible, and then we make decisions based on real information instead of guesswork. It was a smart approach, and over the following 2 weeks we had some of the most honest conversations of my life. I told Maria about my dreams of someday owning my own construction company, of building something lasting that I could be proud of. I told her about my fear that I was still just one bad decision away from losing everything I'd rebuilt. I told her that I wanted more children someday, that I wanted to be the kind of father and husband I'd never had the chance to be before. Maria told me about her dreams of advancing in pediatric nursing, maybe someday becoming a nurse practitioner with her own practice. She told me about her fear that Rosa would grow up without a stable father figure, about her worry that she wasn't enough on her own to give her daughter everything she needed. She told me that she wanted Rosa to have siblings, that she wanted to build a family with someone who loved both of them unconditionally. Our dreams are compatible, I observed after we'd finished sharing everything. Very compatible. The question is whether the timing works. What if we made it work? What do you mean? What if I took the regional job but negotiated for shorter travel rotations? What if we got married, and you could travel with me sometimes when Rosa's in school? What if we planned it so that in 5 years, when I've gained the experience and saved the money, I could start my own company here in Birmingham? Maria stared at me across the dinner table, her eyes wide with surprise. Did you just propose to me in the middle of a career planning discussion? Maybe, if that's what you want. I know it's crazy soon, and I know we haven't been dating very long, but Maria, I love you. I love Rosa. I want to build a life with both of you, and I'm willing to make whatever compromises necessary to make that happen. Tank Thompson, are you asking me to marry you? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. Yes, I'm asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to let me be Rosa's father. I'm asking you to take a leap of faith on us. Maria was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. The engagement was short and the wedding was small, held in the same park where the Atlanta community had celebrated my rescue of Rosa 2 years earlier. Mrs. Patterson flew down from Georgia to attend, along with Dr. Mitchell, Big Jim, and several of my construction crew buddies. Maria's parents came from Texas, and Rosa served as the world's most adorable flower girl, scattering petals with enthusiastic abandon while wearing a white dress that made her look like a tiny princess. We honeymooned in Gulf Shores, Alabama, just the three of us, building sandcastles and collecting seashells and marveling at how much our lives had changed. Rosa called me Daddy for the first time on that trip, running toward me on the beach with her arms outstretched and her face radiant with joy. Daddy, Daddy, look what I found. She held up a perfect sand dollar, still wet from the surf. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Should we take it home to show Mommy? Yes. Daddy, will you carry me? I scooped her up and settled her on my shoulders, where she could survey the beach like a tiny queen. In that moment, walking along the Alabama coast with my daughter giggling above me and my wife walking beside us, I felt completely and utterly content. The regional supervisor position turned out to be everything the company had promised and more. I negotiated for a schedule that kept me home 4 days a week, and Maria was able to arrange her hospital shifts to match my travel schedule. Rosa thrived in her new school, made friends easily, and adapted to having a daddy who traveled for work but was always excited to come home. 5 years later, I started Thompson Construction with 3 employees and a single contract to build a small office complex in downtown Birmingham. Maria had completed her nurse practitioner certification and was working part-time at a pediatric clinic while raising Rosa and our new son, Marcus Jr., who had inherited his father's size and his mother's determined personality. 10 years after I'd saved a baby from a burning house while living under a bridge, I was sitting in my own office, reviewing plans for our latest project, when my secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Thompson, there's a reporter here from the Birmingham News. She wants to interview you about the anniversary of your rescue in Atlanta. Send her in, I said, straightening my tie and wondering how the story would sound now, told from the perspective of a successful business owner, devoted husband and father of 2. But as I prepared to tell my story once again, I realized that the most important part wasn't the dramatic rescue or the remarkable transformation. The most important part was the simple truth that had guided every decision since that rainy night under the bridge. When someone needs help, you help them. When life gives you a second chance, you make it count. And when love finds you in the most unexpected place, you hold on to it with everything you have. The reporter settled into the chair across from my desk, pulled out her recording device, and smiled. So, Mr. Thompson, tell me about the night that changed everything. I leaned back in my chair, looked out the window at the Birmingham skyline, and began to tell the story of how a homeless man sleeping under a bridge became a hero, not because of one moment of courage, but because of every choice he made afterward to keep being worthy of the name.